Hello guys, I didn't know it was
blackjack is false, then the dealer should be willing to give the player a new card. So let's try this. We'll start the game. 15, new card. 25, you're out of the game. Let's try to ask the dealer if we can please get one more card. Oh, nothing happens. It works. Brilliant. Really good job doing this challenge. Okay, so our blackjack game is almost complete. There's just a tiny little feature I would like to add as well. Because if you've ever played online blackjack or poker, what you normally see is your own name and your credits or your chips somewhere on the screen. So what I mean by that is something along the lines of this. Like that. So you see your name and how many credits you have, or chips, or whatever. And this is nice because then it's possible to later implement the concept of winning, of increasing your chips, and of losing as you are betting or playing rounds, which are critical components of any blackjack game. However, I would implement the lines of this. Like that. So you see your name and how many credits you have, or chips, or whatever. And this is nice because then it's possible to later implement the concept of winning, of increasing your chips, and of losing as you are betting or playing rounds, which are critical components of any blackjack game. However, I wouldn't want to hard-code it in the HTML like this. We of course want to represent this data in our JavaScript, as that gives us the ability to change it. Now I'm going to just show you how we could do this to begin with, by first giving this an ID of player-L and removing the contents of it. And then in the JavaScript, we could do let player name equals pair and let player chips equals 145, for example. And then we could grab the element player L equals document.get element by ID, passing in the ID we just created. And then do the playerl.text content, which you know by now. Your name, colon, and a space, and then a $sign, and then plus the player chips, like that. If we now run this, you can see, yes, that we render it in the exact same way. However, now we've come into a situation where two values that are inherently connected together, like the player and his chips, which currently live in two different variables. What would make more sense in this situation would be to somehow combine this into a single unity. And that is where so-called objects come into play. That is another data type which resembles arrays a little bit, but they are also different in some fundamental ways. But they are kind of also buckets where you store data. So in our case, we would perhaps want to create a player object in which we can store both the player's name and the chips. So I'm going to show you how to do this. You might feel a little bit confused as you see it, but over the next few casts, you're going to practice objects yourself. So I'm going to show you how to do this. You might feel a little bit confused as you see it, but over the next few casts, you're going to practice objects yourself. So in a context like this, here. However, you can see that something is wrong here with all these red lines. And that's because the syntax for creating items inside of our object is different from how we define variables. First of all, we don't use the let keyword in front of the names. And secondly, we replace the assignment with a colon. And thirdly, just as we have in arrays, we separate the items with commas, but we don't do that on the last item. Finally, here it would make sense to omit the player, as we've already used that name as the name of the entire object. So we can just rather do name, and I'm not going to capitalize it, and chips, like that. Now we have taken our two variables and grouped them together in this little bucket, which we are calling player. And the way we now can refer to these values, pair and 145, is by using the object name, player, and then the given key. And that is the name, because this is called a key, and its value. So name is the key, and pair is the value. Also, chips is a key, and 145 is a value. So to replace player chips with a reference to the chips inside of the player object, we'll instead do player.chips. If I run this code, you can see we get the exact same result. You're probably a little bit confused now, so don't worry if you think this was hard. Over the next few casts, you are going to practice objects for yourself so that this becomes muscle memory and second nature to you. Let's move on. One way to think of objects is that they give you the ability to store data in depth. And with that in mind, we'll know that objects are so-called complex data types, or also called composite data types, because we use numbers, strings, booleans, even arrays in order to compose objects. So they often store quite a lot of data. And they can even store objects within objects. That kind of nested data structure is not something you're going to think about now. For now, just think of it as key value pairs. And let's look this through the lens of a real-world example. Because here you can see the CSS Grid course, the real-world objects. That kind of nested data structure is not something you're going to think about now. For now, just think of it as key value pairs. And let's look this through the lens of a real-world example. That's always easier. So here on Scrimba, we represent our courses as objects. Because here you can see the CSS Grid course, actually the very first course we launched back in the days, and it has a bunch of different data. For example, it has the title, the number of lessons, and the creator of the course, the length of the course, and the level of it. So let's actually translate this course into JavaScript, into how the data structure actually looks. So do let course equals open and closed curly brackets. One thing I like to do if I'm bored is to search for epic places to live on Airbnb. For example, castles, like this wish list I came across right here, which contains a bunch of more or less affordable castles to rent across Europe. So, for example, this really neat looking castle right here only costs $190. I mean, that's what people pay for like 10 square meters in a hotel room in central London. So pretty cool that you can rent a castle for that same price. But anyway, the point being that these listings here on Airbnb most likely take advantage of the object data structure in order to store all of the data that they need to present to the user. So this can also be a great exercise for you so that we can build up that object muscle memory of yours. So I want you to basically create an object that represents an Airbnb castle listing. It should contain at least one boolean, one string, one number, and one array. It can contain a bunch more if you want to go above and beyond. However, that's the minimum requirement. And at the end, I want you to log out at least two of the keys using the dot notation. So go ahead and do this right now.
Meaning of available, used about things,
Okay, hopefully that went well. Let's do this together. I'll do let like that. As for the number, I think the price, it's very natural to use. Price, $190. And what about the Boolean? Which components here naturally lend themselves well to be using a Boolean data type under the hood? Well, I think the fact that two of these are superhosts and the third is not points to this being a suitable piece of data for the Boolean data type, because you're either a superhost or you're not. So is superhost, this one happened to be true. And then finally, there's the array. What kind of data here would it make sense to place inside of an array? Well, it could be that these kind of bullet points here are arrays that are pulled out of the underlying data and are kind of the featured selling points that Airbnb wants to list out. Or actually, you can see that there's multiple images here if you see this carousel indicator. So the images is very natural to have inside of an array. And also the reviews, that's definitely a list of many items. So it doesn't matter what you choose, or if you choose something completely different. The point is just that I wanted you to write an array inside of an object. So I'm going to choose images like that, make that an array. And here we probably have URLs to the specific images. So it might be img slash castle1.png, img slash castle2.price, sold in 90, move on. Okay, welcome back. Now it's your time to render out the player's name and his or her chips on the page. So it's a 4-part challenge. First, you are to create a paragraph with an ID of player L. Then you are to move over to the JavaScript and create the player object here at the very top. And you are to give it 2 keys, name and chips. Then you are to move down to where you are grabbing elements from the DOM, and then grab hold of the player L paragraph and store it in a variable called player L. Then you are to render the player's name and chips inside of player L. So, pretty big challenge, but you've seen me do it before and you've practiced how to work with objects, so I think you're going to nail this one. Give it your best shot, and then I will show you how to do it as well afterwards.
Sorry, guys, I couldn't open the mic. I'm sorry. Okay, let's now just do this. Okay, now it's a ID, EN. Then here we are gonna write nothing, as I suppose. Yeah, we're gonna write nothing. Now JS. Want to create a variable that is name is what was name. Head. Okay, we need to create an object. Same. That here. Hmm. Bro, this guy is so smart. So fucking smart. True. My bed you smell like. Okay. Mm, mm, mm. Bad sheets smells but I'm going to also do practice time. That's all.
Okay,
Okay,
hopefully
hopefully
that
that
went well.
will.
If not, no, I will show you how to do it as well afterwards.
Okay. Okay, hopefully
Okay,
that
hopefully
hopefully
that
that
went
went
well.
well.
If not, no worries. Let's do it together. First, we'll do a paragraph here, and we'll give it the ID of player-L, like that. Nothing happens because it's empty. Moving over to the JavaScript, we are to create the player object. Let player equals, open and close. Let's say I have $200, and we know how to do that. Dollars in chips right now. 3, grab a hold of the player L paragraph and store it in a variable called player L. Okay, we know how to do that. Let player L equals here. At this point, let's console side of player L. We know how to do that as well. Player L dot text content equals, and here we have to concatenate the string and dig into the object to find the correct values. So we'll start with the player dot chips. Now, this is all set up. Let's run the project, and there we go. We have rendered it out. Great job solving this challenge. Now that you've learned about objects, I want to tell you about a specific coding pattern that we've actually been using quite a lot here, but that we aren't going to implement from scratch ourselves in this module. But since we still are exposed to it, I want you to understand what's going on under the hood. And that pattern is to create functions inside of objects, something which we also call methods. Because exposed to it, I want you to understand what's going on under the hood. And that pattern is to create functions inside of objects. Now that you've learned about objects, I want to tell you about a specific coding pattern that we've actually been using quite a lot here, but that we aren't going to implement from scratch ourselves in this module. But since we still are exposed to it, I want you to understand what's going on under the hood. And that pattern is to create functions inside of objects, something which we also call methods. Because let's say that, for example, we create another key here, which is say hello, and then a colon, and then as the value, we'll actually write a function like this. We won't give it a name, it'll just be an anonymous function, and inside we'll console log JSON. That's howdy in Norwegian. And now if we want to invoke this function, we'll do player.say hello, and then open and close parentheses. If we run the code now, you can see that indeed we are logging JSON to the console. And now the reason I wanted to show this to you is because don't you think this syntax looks a little bit familiar? Like first a variable, then a dot, and then a function that you are calling with the parentheses at the end. Because actually, that's the exact same thing we're doing here when we're saying document dot get element by ID and the parentheses. And here we're also passing in a value, but it's essentially the same thing. And also here down at math.random, also the same thing. Math is an object and random is a function on that object, also called a method. And even our good old friend console.log is the exact same thing. Object with a method. So this is not something we are going to implement ourselves in this module, but I just wanted you to be aware of that, so that when I speak about methods, you know that they are simply functions that are attached to objects. So with that, let's move on. So, you have built your very first JavaScript game. Congrats with that. This is perhaps the first of many games you're going to build, perhaps the start of a career as a game developer. I don't know. Anyway, give yourself a pat on the back. You have learned a ton. And actually, let's do a little recap so that we remind yourself about all the awesome things you've learned throughout this section. One thing which was key to our app and is key to basically every web app out there is the arrays. We defined a card array, and also, you reassigned the array down in the start game function where you defined it with items. And then all the way down at the new card button, you also pushed to the array. So you are starting to get some serious array skills. Also, we worked with objects. Up here, we created our player object. And the object, as you remember, contains key value pairs. And it's also a data type that is used in basically every single web app out there. The third data type you learned was booleans, namely the true and false for the has blackjack and is alive variables. We flip them around, so we set is alive to true down here and has blackjack set to true down here, and thus creating kind of a state for our game. This brings us to the next important concept you learned, which is the if-else statements that wrapped these booleans and so many other things. This is key. You cannot build apps without these kinds of conditional statements. Both the if, the else if, and the else are absolutely key in any programming language. And in order to make these if-else statements work, we used comparison operators. That's these guys in here, less than or equal to or triple equal. They helped us define the conditions as to when we wanted to render the blocks of code in the if-else statement. Moving on, we also did logical operators. The AND operator, which checked that both this condition and this condition was true in order for us to run this code in the block of the if statement. And something we also learned was the for loops. It was here in the render game function, where we used the for loop to loop through our cards array and render out each of the cards. Again, for loop is just one of those foundational things in programming, because so much of programming is evolved around looping through data and doing things based upon the data. Whether that's rendering it out, making calculations, sending it off from a server to a client, or just summing it together, for example, it doesn't matter. It's just something you'll do again and again, so I'm really happy that you've learned it as early as now. Another useful tool you've learned is the math object. That allowed us to create this getRandomCard function by using math.random, which gives us a number between 0 and 1, and math.floor, which basically floors the number to the nearest whole number moving downwards. And random, which gives us a number between 0 and 1, and math.floor, which basically floors the number to the nearest whole number moving downwards. And you built upon your further knowledge of functions and learned how to use return statements in functions, because in this getRandomCard, we had to return values, and that's something you didn't know before this section. There's still more things to learn about functions, so we'll definitely continue on with functions in the Chrome extension we're going to build a bit later, but for now, just be proud about the fact that you've at least come to the point where you can return values in functions. That's a big, important step. So, with all of these things learned, I completely understand if you feel that you're a little bit on shaky ground here and that all of these names basically just confuse you even more. I don't think you should worry about that. I would have never remembered the difference between comparison operators and logical operators when I learned JavaScript. What they are called doesn't really matter. The important thing is that you know how to compare two variables, for example, or that you know how to create a true or false variable. Whether that you call them booleans or true false isn't something you should be too worried about right now. So even though this might look scary, try to not let it scare you. Just focus on coding as much as you can, because over time, these concepts will mature in your mind and become second nature. And actually, on that note, you are going to get some practice right away, because before we jump on to the final project, the Chrome extension, I'm going to throw a few challenges on you just so that we're sure that you really understand these concepts and that you build out that ever so important muscle memory. So let's go ahead and do that right now. Okay, in this challenge, you are going to practice objects and functions. So first, you are going to create a person object that contains
Okay.
Contains 3 keys. Okay, in this challenge,
Let's go.
you are going to practice objects and functions. So first, you are going to create a person object that contains 3 keys: name, age, and country. And the values of those keys should be set by using yourself as an example. So your name, your age, and your country. And then you are to create a function called logData that uses this person object. It just grabs it from the global scope to then create a string in the following format. Per is 35 years old and lives in Norway. Obviously, Per, 35, and Norway are pulled from the person object directly, whereas the rest is a string that is hard-coded inside of the function. Finally, call logData in order to verify that it works. So go ahead and do this right now, and then I will show you the solution.
Okay, that's cool. There's any okay. Pardon. The first thing I want to do is let person. So with let person, at this where the fog length unit is yeah versus age is equal 10 updated oh and I thought I actually in India and I actually live in America. Let's keep India, India, Southern British territory. So, that is the greater function, which is a function law, the focus. If you just said law, all of this time I didn't know this. What the? You just said right law, and then I am the stupidest person alive. No, I'm not. Because I didn't know that it really has it. I didn't know it. Okay. Okay. It takes perimetry and then it can know what in other countries where increase this ampersand and watching
as well. Person equals open and closed curly bracket Norway. First value person dot Per is 35 years old and lives in Norway. Now the final step is to call the Okay, now you are going to practice conditional statements. So that is the else if, and else statements. And the problem you are going to solve is a very common one for train companies or a bus service, which is that the price of the ticket is based upon the passenger's age. For example, if the passenger is less than 6 years old, there's a free pass. 6 to 17 gives a child discount. 18 to 26 gives a student discount. 27 and up to 66, that's the age range that pays the full price. And the people over 66 get the senior citizen discount. So your job is then to create a conditional statement that accounts for all of these scenarios, and based upon the age variable up here, logs out which discount the passenger will get. So go ahead and give this a shot. dot and return the if, and if age is less than 18, because that will in practice mean from 6 to 17 here, because it's less from 6 to 17. 27, up until including 26, that is in other words less than 20. 67, don't need to specify an if, because in all other cases the passenger should get the senior citizen discount. Like that. Let's run the code. At 15, yes, we're getting the child discount working for at least these 3 scenarios, and I hope it works for the rest, so let's move on. Okay, it's time to practice your for loop skills and your geography skills, because I've created... Okay, it's time to practice your for loop skills and your geography skills, because I've created this large countries array here, which contains the 5 largest countries in the world by population size. So it's China, India, USA, Indonesia, and Pakistan. And what you are to do is to use a for loop to log out the following to the world. First, a sentence, the 5 largest countries in the world, and then each of the countries on a new line with a dash and a space in front of the country name. So, to the world. First, a sentence, the 5 largest countries in the world, and then each of the countries on a new line with a dash and a space in front of the country name. So, you are to use a for loop and loop through this array here. You can't simply hard code out all of the console logs. That wouldn't serve any purpose. So try to remember how to use a for loop. If you can't remember it, you can look back at previous casts, as we surely have gone through it. I'll start with index, and we want to use the index we want to incrementing this, wing up the console, and indeed it looks to be working. Now we only job. Okay, now I need your help because I have messed up our large countries array. As you can see, in first place I have Tuvalu, and in fifth place I have Monaco. However, neither of those countries are large enough to deserve a spot in this large countries array. Actually, Tuvalu is a tiny island state far out in the Pacific Ocean with just over 10,000 inhabitants. And Monaco is a tiny state in Europe that's smaller than Central Park in New York. So surely it does not belong in this array. The first and fifth place belongs to China and Pakistan. So I need you to help me fix up this large countries array so that China and Pakistan are added back into their respective places. And to solve this, you are going to use the 4 following tools. First, push and pop, which you've learned earlier in this course, and then their counterparts, unshift and shift, which I haven't taught you about. But this is intentional because I want you to Google how to use unshift and shift. And what I will disclose to you is that they are kind of a mirror image of push and pop, because whereas push and pop will work with the end of the array, unshift and shift works with the beginning of the array. So pop will remove an item at the end, like this, whereas push will push an item into the end, like that. And likewise, Shift will remove an item from the beginning of the array, like this, and unshift will shove an item into the array at the start, like that. So, with that short explanation and Google, you should be able to. I want you to try to solve this challenge. And of course, I will show you the solution when let's do this. I'll start at the end. So I want to replace Monaco with Pakistan. Then I'll do large countries dot pop in order to pop away Monaco. And then large countries push, passing in Pakistan. Now, unshift is named. Unshift makes let's have fixed up the large countries array. Great job. Now it's time for a scary challenge because you are going to check if it is Friday the 13th. And if so, you are going to log out this spooky face because, as you might know, Friday the 13th is kind of a scary date if you've seen the Friday the 13th horror movies. So you have two variables, day of month, which is meant to be from either 1 to 31, depending on which day of the month it is, and then a weekday variable, which is meant to be Friday or Tuesday or Wednesday or any of the days in the week. And if it is both Friday and the 13th, and only if both of those conditions are satisfied, you are to log out the spooky face. So just to remind you, you have to use the logical AND operator, which we learned is symbolized with these two ampersands. So go ahead and give this a shot. Right now. Okay, let's do this. We'll do if, open and close parentheses, and here we'll do day of month, triple equals 13, if it is the 13th day, and if it is the weekday of triple equals Friday. Then we are going to log out the spooky emoji like that. Running the code, nothing happens because it's Friday the 31st, because this time it requires that job. Okay, now you're going to practice returning random numbers. And the problem you are to solve is the rock, paper, scissors game. If you try that, it's a game where two people choose with their hands either a rock, a paper, or a scissor. And the way it works is that the rock will beat the scissor, but the paper will wrap itself around the rock so that the rock loses. And if the match is between the scissor and the paper, the scissor will cut the paper into pieces. So if those rules were a bit confusing, don't worry about it. That's not the point here. Your only job is actually to create a function that returns one of the random items in this array when it's called. So you need to work with math.random in order to achieve this. Go back and watch previous casts if you've forgotten about that, or search for it on Google. That's even better. And finally, when you have coded up your solution and want to see mine, just revert back to this screencast and I will of course show you how to do it as well. Okay, let's do this. We'll call the function get. So we'll do index and then debug along the way. Just we're logging out 0.05, 0.9 value. The value I want, storing it, in other words, math dot numbers between 0 and 2, random index as If you, like me, grew up in the 90s, you might remember this game, Street Fighter II on Super Nintendo. It was really cool. So now I want to create a copy of this game called Emoji Fighter. Or actually, we won't do any fighting here. We'll just set the stage. If you back a random hand, either rock, paper, or scissors, well, that is simply by doing hands and then using the random index as the index. Now let's run this. We're getting scissor, we're getting paper, and we're getting rock. Brilliant. Great job. If you, like me, grew up in the 90s, you might remember this game, Street Fighter II on Super Nintendo. It was really cool. So now I want to create a copy of this game called Emoji Fighter. Or actually, we won't do any fighting here. We'll just set the stage for two emojis to challenge each other. So the way it works is that when the user clicks on the Pick Fighters button, I want two random emojis to appear side by side with a VS between them for versus. As you can see, I've coded up the skeleton for you here by creating this fighters array, which contains all of our different fighters, and also fetching references to the stage and to the button. And the stage is where I want you to render out the emojis, and the button is the one right here. As you can see in the index.js, I've hooked it up with an event listener so that we listen for clicks, which we can verify by inside of this callback function, trigger out click, so that now if we run the code and click on the button, you can see an event listener so that we... And the stage is where I want you to render out the emojis, and the button is the one right here. As you can see in the index.js, I've hooked it up with an event listener so that we listen for clicks, which we can verify by inside of this callback function, trigger out click, so that now if we run the code and click on the button, you can see it is logged to the console. So your job then is to, inside of this function, write the code needed in order to pick two random emojis from this array and then display them in the stage L. Now, as a little hint, if you don't know how to pick a random item from this array, do remember that you know how to generate a random number in JavaScript. And then you can use that random number as an index, which you round click. As you can see in the index.js, I've hooked it up with an event listener so that we... And the for you here by creating fighters button. Won't do any fighting here. We'll just set the stage for two emojis to challenge each other. So the way it works is that when the user clicks on the Pick Fighters button, I want two random emojis to appear side by side with a VS between them for versus. As you can see, I've coded up the skeleton for you here by creating this fighters array, which contains all of our different fighters, and also fetching references to the stage and to the button. And the stage is where I want you to render out the emojis, and the button is the one right here. As you can see in the index.js, I've hooked it up with an event listener so that we listen for clicks, which we can verify by inside of this callback function, trigger out click, so that now if we run the code and click on the button, you can see it is logged to the console. So your job then is to, inside of this function, write the code needed in order to pick two random emojis from this array and then display them in the stage L. Now, as a little hint, if you don't know how to pick a random item, meaning that the final thing we need to do is just replace the console log with stagel.text content. Click again, we get a spider against a... the same expression that we just robot against a dragon. So, great job. Solving this challenge. Hold of items within arrays using the now I have a fun little challenge for you. Because you can see this fruits array here, which contains emoji fruits, basically 3 apples and 2 oranges mixed together. You are going to take these fruits and sort them onto the apple shelf or the orange shelf. The apple shelf is the one at the top here, and the orange shelf is the one at the bottom. They are just simply divs that I've given a little bit of styling. So you are to create a function that, when called, puts the apples onto the apple shelf and the oranges onto the orange shelf. And you should use a for loop, a conditional statement, and the text content property to achieve this. Now, one thing you might be wondering is, how do you work with emojis in JavaScript? And actually, you can treat these as normal strings. It's just as if it said orange here instead of having the emoji. So with that, I wish you good luck, and I'll see you later when I'll show you my solution. function we orange. If it's to do just equal the apple, we're going to plus equal because we want to side of the function with an orange. If it's an apple, just equal fruit text content plus equals the orange. Now, it would have worked perfectly fine if we just omitted this as well, like that, because in our array, if it isn't an apple, we know that it's an orange, but we might be getting other arrays which shall have bananas in them as well. And if so, we don't want to put any bananas in the orange shelf. We want to check explicitly that we are dealing with an orange before we put the fruit up on the shelf. So finally, we just need to sort fruit to run the code. Let's do that. And there we go. We got 3 apples and 2 oranges. triple equals, and then accent. And here we're not going to do just equal and do in our array. If it isn't an apple, we know that it's an orange, but we might be getting up on the shelf, neatly sorted on both of the shelves. So great job.
Hey, it's Gil. I'm a teacher at Scrimba. If you're looking to take your front-end development skills to the next level, get expert code reviews, and build projects that will make your portfolio stand out, then the Scrimba Bootcamp will be great for you. So I want to fill you in on the front-end development projects offered exclusively to Bootcamp students, which are designed to challenge and improve your skills and even give you more practice converting Figma designs into live interactive websites and apps. The program offers alternative projects for each of the solo projects you build on the front-end developer career path. So I'm sure you did a great job building the basketball scoreboard solo project. Well, if you enjoyed it and wanted more opportunities to strengthen and demonstrate your HTML, CSS, and JavaScript skills, as a bootcamp student, you take that next step by building a send-to-pager app where the goal is to use JavaScript to produce and send messages from a phone to a pager you built from scratch. This is only one of many projects in our growing list of bootcamp-only projects. And the best part is that our vetted code reviewers will review all bootcamp exclusive projects to ensure you get the most valuable feedback possible and to help you speed up the learning curve when learning to code. So if you're interested in learning more and joining us in the bootcamp, check out scrimba.com/bootcamp or click on this image. And to review a comparison between what the Scrimba Bootcamp offers versus the Pro subscription, click on this image here. All right, I hope to meet and chat with you soon over in the bootcamp.
Hey, and welcome to this section where we are going to build a Chrome extension, which is just so freaking cool. Because Chrome extensions, if you haven't seen them, are programs that can enhance your browser experience in Chrome. This is an example called Honey. It's really brilliant because what it does is gather coupons from all over the web, and when you visit a page where you want to buy something, it gives you whatever coupons it can find online so that you can save money. And it was acquired by PayPal for $4 billion. So building Chrome extensions is huge because, everyone uses browsers, and surely what comes out of the box when you use Chrome surely hasn't thought of every single problem people might encounter when they are using browsers. And browser extensions is our way as developers to build solutions around these problems. Here's another one, Grammarly. I use it all the time here. So when I write for example, when I write tweets, it sits on top of Chrome and checks my spelling because it has access to what I do on the page, and then suggests how I should improve my spelling and my writing in general. And this one right here is a lifesaver. It's motion, and it saves me hours every single day by stopping me right before I try to enter, for example, Facebook. And it does this with a ton of other distracting sites as well, so that I can focus on what matters. Like, for example, creating courses on Scrimba, or writing code, or doing productive stuff. So cool. Example, Facebook in general. And this one right here is a lifesaver. It's motion, and it saves me hours every single day by stopping me right before I try to enter, for example, Facebook. And it does this with a ton of other distracting sites as well, so that I can focus on what matters. Like, for example, creating courses on Scrimba, or writing code, or doing productive stuff. So cool. If you want to check out more extensions, you can head over to chrome.google.com/webstore. There you can search through all of them. And also, if you want to open your extensions in Chrome, just click this puzzle icon in the top right corner and you'll see all of your extensions. And here you can see Leads Tracker. What's that? Well, that is the one we are going to build in this section. It is based on an puzzle icon in the top right corner and you'll see all of your extensions. And here you can see Leads Tracker. What's that? Well, that is the one we are going to build in this section. It is based on an insight I had when I worked as a developer in a company called Zenera, which is a provider of price information for people who are shipping containers. Because what I saw there was that the sales team at that company spent countless hours tracking down leads, or sourcing leads as they also call it. And that is looking for people online who might be interested in your product. So what they do is browse through a bunch of pages and look at people and no, this guy is probably not interested in our product. This one neither. Yes, here we have a potential customer. Let's save this one to our system. Moving on, this person does not look like a potential customer, but this one does. Yeah, and this one does as well. But this one does not look like a potential customer. So what they then had to do is take these 3 potential customers and store them somewhere so that they could reach out to them in the next phase. And this is something that basically every single sales representative does, because you need people to sell to, so you need to find them somewhere. So our Leads Tracker will be a tool for these kinds of people. The way it works is that you visit a website, for example, a profile on LinkedIn, and then you open up the extensions, click on the Leads Tracker, and there you can see you get the ability to save input. That is any URL that you pass into this input field, or hit Save Tab. If you hit Save Tab, our extension heads over to this tab, grabs the URL, and saves it in a list. And then you can move on to another page, for example, my Save Tab. If you hit Save Tab, our extension heads over to this tab, grabs the URL, and saves it in a list. And then you can move on to another page, for example, my LinkedIn page, and then hit Save Tab again, and boom, there we have the URL to my profile. And then moving on, this is Sindre, our CTO in Scrimba. Yet again, we click Save Tab, and his profile URL is saved. And this data is persisted, so you can close down the app or Chrome, turn off your computer, and when you come back, it's still there. So that you, as a sales representative, can then grab these leads and do something else with it. So this is actually a pretty useful tool for sales representatives. And it's actually deployed in the browser so that you can use it in the real world. And the point with this is to give you the powers to do this, to actually create a Chrome extension that has value, and also give you the skills you need to deploy it to someone's browser. So once you've learned this, I would really recommend you to look for opportunities, look for problems you see out in the world. Maybe there's a problem you have, or someone you study with, or someone you work with, or just a problem someone tells you about. When you come across problems people have, I want you to think, can I build a Chrome extension to help solve this problem? Because if you can do that, you truly have a superpower. That'll manifest itself in opportunities that you will get throughout your career.